I thought you were dead.
My death was greatly exaggerated. So, you're the punk I've heard about.
Guess who's back? For those unaware, my first foray into the SMT scene was actually by making videos going into Nocturne's formulas for damage, accuracy, etc. I learned so much about them while doing the original Nocturne Demonless run that I felt like I had to talk about them after learning how insane they were. And to be honest, Nocturne Demonless only became a video because of the reception those videos got. So thank you for that. That said, I've wanted to make another math video for SMT for quite a while, but I haven't found any game with easily accessible formulas, or at least not formulas worth breaking down. I don't think I would get much mileage out of making a video about Devil Survivor 1's HP and MP growths. Out of the games I was interested in, SMT5 was a big one that I would have loved to do math videos for, but because the game was locked to Switch, there wasn't really any interest in mining the game for its inner workings. But now that it's on PC, and interest in the game is higher, it had its math mined out within a month. Special shoutouts, by the way, to CTOBN for putting in the legwork and getting all these formulas, as well as for letting me bother him over Steam and Discord. You're the reason this video is as feature complete as it is, man. But let me tell you, if you thought this series' math was any less funny after a couple decades, you'd be dead wrong. So, strap yourselves in, everyone, because Nocturne Math is back with a vengeance. For Nocturne, I was able to categorize each video by stats. There was enough to talk about in regards to magic, agility, and luck that I was able to make a video about each. By the way, if you ever wondered why strength and vitality never got videos, it's because this is the only formula Nocturne uses strength for, and this is the only formula Nocturne uses vitality for. There's the strength and vitality videos, guys. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. In all seriousness, were I to do that this time, covering everything about strength would also cover everything about magic, which would also cover everything about vitality. So for vengeance, we're going to be doing this by function rather than form. And what better way to start than by tackling the most important function in any RPG? How much damage am I doing? So the first thing I can say is that vengeance handles physical and magic damage the exact same. The only difference is the stat used. Before we determine what stat we're using, we first have to determine the root. You're going to be seeing this word a lot. Nearly every formula in Vengeance starts with a root value. The root simply asks one question: are you a higher level than 150? If not, the root is equal to your level plus 10. If you're any higher, the root is instead your level divided by 10 plus 145. This essentially means that the root goes up by 1 every level until 150, at which point it changes to going up by 0.1. So enemy damage will go up more slowly once their level exceeds 150. Functionally, this only applies to the challenge fights in the virtual trainer. The game then decides what stat to use. Strength is used for all physical skills, as well as any skills that state in the descriptions that they are strength-based. This includes stuff like Sakanagi, as well as the Draco Strike moves. It also includes Hellbiker's Hellburner. I'm not sure why the game doesn't tell you that, but it also uses strength. This is also what determines whether or not a skill can naturally crit. Magic is used for basically everything else that's not a Magatsuhi skill. As for Magatsuhi skills, with the exception of the Haunt Race's Twilight Wave, all of them simply use the root for their stat. With the stat selected, the game then calculates an offense value. If the stat is less than or equal to the root, offense is the sum of the two. If the stat is greater, which keep in mind will always be level plus 10 for the player, offense is instead calculated via this formula: half of the square root of the stat minus root, plus stat divided by 2, plus root times 3 divided by 2. For the sake of a visual aid, let's use an actual demon as an example. Special thanks to Jaffinator2166 for these videos. He's amazing and the reason I can make these videos while me and Zephyr still playing the game blind without demons on our Monday to Wednesday streams. So let's use everyone's favorite eldritch horror, Lamu, as our example, as he's about to lay waste to a succubus and a narcissus. Lamu's level here is 51, so the root will be 61. His unique attack, Silt of Ruin, is not strength-based, so it uses his magic stat of 53. 53 is not greater than 61, so Silt of Ruin's offense is simply 61 plus 53, which equals 114. This 114 will now be compared to the vitality stats of both Narcissus and Succubus. But let's keep it simple and explain what's happening first. The game subtracts the defender's vitality from the attacker's offense. If offense minus vitality is less than or equal to half of the offense value, the game uses the first formula, which I will call the high vitality formula. 2/3 of the offense value minus 1/3 of the defender's vitality minus the square root of the defender's vitality minus 1/2 of the offense value, which is then all divided by 3. If offense minus vitality is greater than 3/4 of the offense value, then the game uses what we'll call the low vitality formula. 5/6 of the offense value minus 1/3 of the defender's vitality, plus the square root of 1/4 of the offense value minus the defender's vitality, which is then divided by 3. Seeing as there are vitality values that would be between these two formulas, this brings us to our third formula, which is used in the event that neither of the above formulas apply. For the sake of consistency, we'll call it the standard vitality formula. Offense minus the defender's vitality. That's it. Whichever formula is used, the result is internally referred to as the base, so we'll do the same. It should be noted that the base cannot be lower than 1.0, so as a final failsafe, if the formula somehow produced a result below 1, it will be set to 1. Returning to the Lamu example, let's take Succubus as our example target. Succubus has 20 vitality, so we can plug that in to determine which formula to use. First, we check the high vitality formula. 114 minus 20 is less than 114 divided by 2, and we get 94 is less than or equal to 57. As this is very not true, Succubus does not get the high vitality formula. So now let's check for low vitality. We can shortcut the left side of this formula since we know it already. 114 times 3 divided by 4, we can simplify that down to 114 times 0.75, which results in 94 is greater than 85.5. This is indeed true, so Succubus will be subjected to the low vitality formula. Sorry, Succubus. Thus, we use the low vit formula to calculate the base. 114 times 5 divided by 6 minus 20 divided by 3 plus the square root of 114 divided by 4 minus 20 divided by 3. Stepping through this formula, we get 570 divided by 6 minus 6.66 repeating plus the square root of 28.5 minus 20 divided by 3, which becomes 95 minus 6.66 repeating plus the square root of 8.5 divided by 3, which equals 88.33 repeating plus 2.9155 divided by 3, which equals 0.9718. Add it all together and we get 89.3052. For ease of rounding, I'll be rounding to the 4th decimal for this example. With this, we have finally determined the move's base. Fun fact, this is actually the base of all magic attacks made by this Lamu against a wild Succubus. So if you've come this far, you can just plug in slightly different numbers later to find out the damage of any other magic attack that Lamu has. Anyway, with our base established, we can now move into the formula to modify the base damage. Whoa. Okay. Alright, in seriousness, as bulky as this formula looks, it's basically just a giant multiplication problem. Let's break it down one step at a time. So, starting from the base, we then move into the skill power. The power of the skill is actually divided cleanly by 100. So we take the power of our chosen skill, Silt of Ruin, which is power 140, divided by 100 and we get 1.4. Slap that number into the formula. It is also worth noting that this is where any skills with variable power are calculated. So if a skill gets stronger upon crit, the game checks to see if it gets the power increase here. This also applies to any skills with unique formulas. Beatdown and Power Punch have a base power of 110 and 155 respectively, but are multiplied by 1 plus the user's current HP divided by their max. So the healthier you are, the stronger these moves get. Megiddo Arc is actually only 10 power at base, but increases by 110 for every enemy. Against one target, this is a meager power 120, but against 4 targets, this can go as high as 450. Against mobs, this can go as high as 670 on 6 targets. Heavenly Akumi is power 150, but increases by 80 for each debuff the target has. Notable, this is types of debuffs, so Taru, Raku, and Suku could get this up to 390. And finally, any skills based on the attacker's level have their base power multiplied by 1 plus the attacker's level divided by 50. At level 50, this will be a times 2 multiplier, at 100, a times 3, and at level 150, a times 4 multiplier. This bit I found particularly interesting because it means level-based skills actually scale off of level twice. If a skill uses the root as its stat, leveling up not only increases your level and casting stat by 1, but also gives the skill a 2% increase in damage. For example, the Makatsuhi skill Freikugel EX has a base power of 650, but even at level 1, it would get a multiplier of 1 plus 1 divided by 50, meaning the lowest it could theoretically be is power 663. At level 27, Freikugel EX will have a power of 1001, 1 point higher than Lucifer's Falling Star. Although a casting stat of 37, that's gonna hit hard. At the maximum level of 99 in a standard playthrough, it reaches a power of 1937. At 150 in Godborn, it has 2600 power. So yeah, Makatsuhi's skills hit hard. But I'm getting sidetracked. Let's get back to Lamu. Attack stage refers to the stage of the attacker's offensive buffs. This ranges from a 70% multiplier at -2 to a 140% multiplier at +2. And just to cover it now, defense buffs work the same way. So taking the above clip in the example, Lamu's at +1 offense and Succubus is at neutral defense. So our formula gets a 1.2 and 1.0 multiplier. Charge is simple. This refers to any charge-like skills that are applied. These act as simple multipliers to the formula. Charge and Concentrate are a 1.8 multiplier to strength and magic attacks respectively. Dornum Gladi and Dornum Magicii are 1.5 to strength and magic attacks. Impaler's Animus has been nerfed down to 1.3, down from 1.8 in the original game, but still applies piercing damage. And Impaler's Glory, the Magatsuhi skill version of Animus, is a whopping 3.4 times multiplier. It should be noted, none of these stack with each other, so use them carefully. As for Lamu, he had none of these, so he doesn't get any bonuses here. Pleroma refers to the bonuses provided by Pleroma passives. Basic Pleroma provides a 1.2 multiplier to attacks of its specific element, and High Pleromas provide a 1.35 multiplier. Important to note, Pleromas stack with themselves additively. Since they're added, running both provides a 1.55 times multiplier. But since Lamu again has neither of these, this is 1.0. Zealot refers to Critical Zealot. If the attacker does not have this skill, this is 1.0. If they do, they receive an 0.9 times multiplier to all damage, but a 1.4 times multiplier on critical hits. However, this 1.45 is applied on top of the 0.9, which does not get disabled. So if you have Critical Zealot equipped, you'll get an 0.9 multiplier here on non-crits, and a 1.305 multiplier on crits. Lamu again has neither. Potential refers to the damage multiplier from skill potentials. This can range from a 55% increase or decrease the damage, depending on how good or bad the attacker is with that element, though -9 potential goes unused. It should also be noted that all items in Makatsuhi skills are treated as having 0 potential. Lamu, for the first time in a while, actually does get a bonus here. With a +2 to Almighty potential, he will receive a 1.15 times multiplier to his damage here. Efficacy refers to whether or not the target is weak to or resists the attack, as well as whether or not the attack is a critical hit. A resisted hit is halved, a neutral hit is, well, neutral, a weak hit gets a 25% boost, a critical gets a 50% boost, and a critical hit against a weakness gets a 75% boost. Though, a fun quirk here, Demi-Fiend's summons actually take 200% more damage. This means a critical hit against a weakness would get a whopping 3.5 times multiplier, so something to help you in your Demi-Fiend attempts. Back to Lamu though, even though his innate trait allows magic skills with positive potential to crit, he was sadly not so lucky today. So that's another big 1-0 for him. And here's the part I'm sure you are all waiting for, level correction, or as it's been commonly dubbed by the fandom, level scaling. Level scaling was egregious in base SMT5, with 1 or 2 levels giving you a 30% boost to your damage. Vengeance, however, toned this down a lot. If you didn't play the original, it should say a lot that this was a selling point for Vengeance. But let's see how much it still plays into things. Firstly, this part of the process calculates a sum factor. If the sum of the attacker and defender's levels is less than or equal to 30, the sum factor is set to 0. A bit of a spoiler, if this occurs, the value used for level scaling will end up as 1.0. This is to say that level scaling is completely disabled until the sum of you and your target's levels is at least 31. Regardless, if the sum of your levels is above 30, but less than 130, you are plugged into the middle formula, which sets sum factor equal to attacker level plus defender level minus 30, divided by 1000. The way this formula works, it will cap when the sum of your levels is equal to 130, giving it a result of 100 divided by 1000, or 0.1. Which makes sense, as if the sum of your levels is greater than 130, the sum factor is just set to 0.1. The sum factor is then used in one of 2 formulas, depending on whether or not the attacker or the defender has a level lead of 3 or more. If the defender has a 3-level lead, the level correction modifier is equal to 1 minus the square root of the defender's level divided by the attacker's level minus 1, multiplied by the sum factor, multiplied by the defender's level minus the attacker's level minus 2. If the result of this would produce a correction modifier below 0.5, it is instead set to 0.5. The most level scaling can do in Vengeance is cut your damage in half. If you notice you're losing more than half your damage against a higher level target, This is likely because higher level targets tend to have higher vitality. If the attacker has a level bleed of 3 or more, the formula looks similar but in the attacker's favor. 1 plus the square root of 1 minus the defender's level divided by the attacker's level, multiplied by the sum factor, multiplied by the attacker's level minus the defender's level minus 2. This is Robin from the future, we forgot a minus 2 there. Multiplied by 1.2. And as above, if your result would be over 1.5, it is set to 1.5. And lastly, if neither side is 3 levels above or below the other, the correction modifier is set to 1.0. If you're within 2 levels of your target, your damage is not getting scaled. So let's apply this to Lamu. Lamu's level is 51 and Succubus's is 38. The sum of 51 and 38 is 89, which is between 30 and 130, so our sum factor is 89 minus 30 divided by 1000, or 0.059. Moving into the level correction calculation, Lamu has a 3-level lead on Succubus, so the attacker is given the advantage. 1 plus the square root of 1 minus 38 divided by 51 times 0.059 times 51 minus 38 minus 2 times 1.2. Simplifying down, 1 plus the square root of 1 minus 0.7451 times 0.059 times 11 times 1.2 equals 1 plus the square root of 0.2549 times 0.059 times 13.2 equals 1 plus 0.5049 times 0.7788 equals 1 plus 0.3932, or just 1.3932. Now for Lamu, that is enough to move on. But I do feel the need to mention one thing. The game literally cheats in scripted fights. For nearly every scripted encounter in the entire game, bosses, abscesses, fiends, Nahobino, everything, there is a special variable set in the game's code that causes them to automatically skip this check, instead setting the level scaling modifier to 1.0. This means that for nearly every scripted fight, being 10 levels under them or 10 levels above them won't change how much damage they are doing to you. I'm of two minds about this. On the one hand, it means that players being severely underleveled won't see bosses doing more damage to them, but a player being overleveled won't see their damage go down. Vitality is the only factor in a boss doing more or less damage. I'd be interested to hear your guys' opinion about this. But back to the formula. Difficulty is another simple modifier. Depending on the difficulty, you'll do more or less damage to enemies and vice versa. On hard, you deal 70% damage and enemies deal 130%. On normal, everyone deals 100%. On casual, you deal 130 and enemies deal 70. And on safety, you deal a whopping 1000% damage, whereas enemies deal only 10%. Suffice to say, safety mode is practically impossible to die on, as enemies will be doing a pittance to you while you all but one-shot them. Thankfully, while Jaffinator was not doing this on hard, he did do this on normal, so no damage reductions here. Exploit refers to a Mogatoki exploit, and a Mogatoki skill which provides a 2.1 times multiplier when striking a weakness. This is stacked on top of the standard for weaknesses, so it effectively boosts weak hits from 125% damage to 262.5. This is not active, obviously, so no bonuses here. Guarding refers to whether or not the defender is guarding. Enemies can't guard, but if they could, they would be taking 20% less damage from attacks. Since they were not, this is 1.0. And finally, we get to the fun ones. Enemy multiplier refers to another secret hidden variable, which gives a unit a special damage boost to all of their damage. For the most part, this is not used, and it's mostly used to just make some of the early game demons a bit weaker, or to make certain abscess fights a bit stronger. To specify, the following abscess fights deal 20% more damage than normal. The Mermaid Abscess in Minato, the Jack Frost and Makami and Feng Huang abscesses in Shinagawa, and the Najaraga, Michikuji and Anzu, 4 Kaiwan, Hanuman, Oberon, and Isis, and Kukulane and Dakini abscesses in Ginza. There are a couple other oddballs, like the Loop Garo mobs in Taito also do 20% extra damage, but for the most part, it's nothing crazy. Well, except for this dickhead, who deals a whopping 400% damage. That's not a joke. All of Masakato's damage is quadrupled in his boss fight. You want to take this fight as safely as possible, because if Masakato gets a chance to get a hit in on you, he's gonna send you back to the Heian period. Lastly, we get to innate skills. These are any innates which modify damage in any way, from things which buff damage like Mara's Fear of Death, to things which reduce it, like Lilith's Kadishtu Mandate. Note, these are to be multiplied together, so say Mara was attacking Lilith while having Fear of Death active. He'd receive his 1.1 times bonus, but also receive Lilith's imposed 0.85 times penalty. But since Lamu is benefiting from no damage boosting passives, he receives no bonus. Thus, we end with our modified 240.3795, which is then truncated to the maximum degree since we still haven't learned from Nocturne. Thus, our modified damage is 240. This serves as our minimum damage. At no point can your damage be lower than this value. This number is then run through a series of last-minute modifiers to ensure everything is in order. These are usually things applied after the fact by the player or the enemy, and are applied in this exact order. If the player has activated the Nahabino unique skill, Kanabi Veil, the damage is multiplied by 0.7 and rounded up. If the player activated the Magatsuhi skill Shield of God, the damage is multiplied by 0.1 and rounded up. Shield of God and Kanabi Veil replace each other on use, so only one of these can be active at a time. If the player has activated Omogatoki Savage, all damage is doubled. If the player has activated Omogatoki Adversity, the damage is multiplied by 1 minus the current HP divided by the max HP of the user, multiplied by 3.4. This means that the less HP you have, the stronger Adversity becomes, capping out at 3.4. Notably, Adversity cannot provide a multiplier below 1, and whatever value it creates, it is then rounded down. Lastly, if the target has Shroud during the fight against Konsura and is hit by his unique attack, Heliopolis Dawn, the target will receive a 0.05 multiplier to the damage, taking only 5% of what they should have taken. Since none of these apply to our situation, we are left with our minimum of 240. Alright, let's take a breather, because I know that was a lot. Unlike other games, Vengeance has a lot more going into its damage than the simple 2.5s and 2.0s of Nocturne. Between potentials and the enemy's vitality and the myriad number of innates to keep track of, it can definitely feel like a lot to swallow. But sadly, we have one last thing to handle. Once minimum damage is calculated, we need to roll for the true damage. This is when RNG is calculated. How does it work? Well, the game generates two values, simply called A and B. A is a value between 0 and 1/10 the value calculated for the minimum damage, minus 1. It calculates this by picking any random integer between 0 and 32,767, and then dividing that into 32,767. It then multiplies the resulting decimal into 1/10 of your minimum damage, then subtracts 1 to get A. Note, if this would mean A could be less than 0, it is instead set to 0. B is comparatively simpler, it just picks an integer between 0 and 3. Then it adds both A and B to your minimum damage, and that is the damage you deal. This functionally means all damage varies between 100 and 110% of the minimum damage calculated by the formula, to a cap of 99,999. That said, even in something this complex, there is a quirk. Since the value of minimum damage divided by 10 is truncated, if your minimum damage is less than 20, this will round to 1, and 1 minus 1 equals 0. This means the resulting damage will just be minimum plus B, which can range between minimum and minimum plus 3. This means that particularly low damaging skills like Aramasa or Astral Saint Strike can show a much higher variance than normal. If an attack would only deal 1 damage, its damage would range from 1 to 4, giving it a seemingly astronomical 100 to 400% range. Of course, this is likely the very purpose of the B variable, to give low damage moves like Aramasa some damage variance, when they'd otherwise just be chipping paint, but it's still funny to mention. So using this to calculate our maximum damage, 240 divided by 10 is equal to 24, minus 1 is 23. Since the maximum of B is 3, the maximum of A plus B is 26. 26 plus 240 is equal to 266. Thus, the damage range of this attack is between 240 to 266. And as we can see, our damage is within range. And that, my friends, is how you calculate damage in Vengeance. While these formulas are certainly complex, I think the result is one of the best SMT has ever had. Compared to games like Nocturne, which favored physical too much, or games like Digital Devil Saga, which did the exact opposite, SMT5 manages to make both stats feel good. Both strength and magic play by the same rules, and have ways to engage the press turn system. Magic might be more accessible, But support skills like Critical Aura and Impaler's Animus allow physical to more than compete. Insane as these formulas are, it all somehow makes sense in the end. Unlike Nocturne, the insanity actually has a point, rather than just being insanity. Vengeance is so good because of how malleable it is, and the traits every demon provides allow you to tackle things in unique ways. No matter how screwball these formulas may seem, take the game by its horns and see what it has to offer you. Who knows? You might just find something special nobody's thought of before. Special thanks to all Patreon backers, including T, Sokekion, Hound, Dylan Toomey, Draco, Axel Vosenberg, Trekker96, Kirara, Gracemy, Cuddlefish, and Caius Cole, and to all YouTube members, including Fabrizio Pignataro, Oplin2, Not D Wadler, Jaffinator2166, Peak of the Wumpus, Midna, Moshi, Ryoko Strifer, Axel Ryman, Caius Cole again, and Dawn Shimmer. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Do whatever you want from me. You can call me a bitch for all I care. Choose your own path. Don't let someone choose it for you.